Alright, coming off yet another really big win this week over MV and his San Diego Chimp Chargers. I guess I'm ready to field some questions, so let's hear it.
Hi Jolt, it's your friend Danza here from the Daily Danza. Thank you for issuing us press passes and kicking those other fake news organizations out of here. So, obviously you had a pretty big win this week. I want to know just your general thoughts on the battle, on your team, your game plan, and how it fared. Tell me about it.
Well, definitely a good result. We're now #1 in the entire league, actually, in terms of record and differentials. So that's kind of nice. Definitely a good result. The team I brought seemed to work out about as well as I could have hoped. I think that the specific matchup based upon what he brought was really beneficial for me to the specific team that I brought. Like the way the matchup worked. It was very possible that he could have brought a team that matched up very well against the specific team that I brought, just because we both had so many big threats against each other. But yeah, pretty fortunately for me in this matchup, this specific team that I brought seemed to match up very well against the specific team that he brought, and as a result, we ended up with pretty good score here for this game, and we're able to continue the winning streak here, now up to 4 games. So yeah, overall, really happy with it, and looking forward to a potential rematch with him as well, maybe in the playoffs if we both make it.
How's it shaking, Mama? Elvis here from the Daily Danza. You had me all shook up when you made all of your killer predictions this week. Did MV bring the team you expected?
Welcome back from the dead, Elvis. But yeah, so MV brought a team that was kind of similar to what I expected, kind of. The Among Us was very unexpected, and after watching his team builder, I can understand why he brought it. I still disagree with it personally, but you know, it was a good enough bring, I guess, in his mind for, you know, to fit the team that he was trying to create for this matchup. So that's fair enough. I just felt like Among Us didn't really have the best matchup against me, just because it seems like almost everything on my team is able to beat it 1v1 in some way. Even Braylum can technically beat an Among Us as well, and yeah, so I think he brought it specifically for the Durant, is what he mentioned in his commentary, which is fair enough. But yeah, that was the big surprise on his team. I think everything else was about as expected. I knew he had to bring the Slowbro for the Arcanine, as Arcanine was way too big of a threat against his team. Otherwise, if he didn't actually bring that water type that could resist fire, his other water being the Empoleon that doesn't exactly resist fire, so not an Arcanine switch in at all. So it makes sense why he brought the Slowbro. The Tapu Koko was very obviously coming. Mega Pinsir I thought was very obviously coming. Alolan Raichu I thought was a very likely bring as well, just because my team is kind of weak to electric types that have good coverage options, which both the Koko and the Alolan Raichu have. And the Empoleon we all knew was going to come as well, as his Rocker and potentially his Defogger as well. So yeah, no real surprises outside of the Among Us, but fortunately we were able to play around that pretty well.
Danza here. So, in another life of mine, before I became a full-time news reporter for the Daily Danza, I actually used Saltvest Gardevoir in the Season 1 GBA Championship. Now, I want to ask you, what was your inspiration to bring Saltvest Gardevoir? Was it that Season 1 game?
It was definitely you. No, but actually, so, looking at the matchup, I really did think that Alolan Raichu was likely to come, and if you look at the potential switch-ins on my team, I don't really have many, so naturally I needed a way to be able to switch in / check an Alolan Raichu under electric terrain, as I'm not going to be able to do that from a speed standpoint unless it's with a Choice Scarfed Gardevoir, and I wanted to make sure I had that way to deal with it. I really didn't like Scarfed or Choice Locked Gardevoir's matchup here against MV, just due to his natural resistances, so I knew that I needed something to take the hit from that electric type, the Alolan Raichu, and I felt like Assault Vest Gardevoir was the best way to be able to do that. And then just as an additional benefit, this was not at all the first thing that I was thinking of whenever I put the Gardevoir on the team, but his Regenerator Core, his potential Regenerator Core of the Among Us Slowbro was just so weak to an Assault Vest Gardevoir, since Gardevoir can switch into both of them, mainly the Slowbro, and trace the Regenerator, really chew any hit and immediately threaten them out. And I can also very easily threaten out the Among Us as well on a more safe switch, and I don't want to hard switch into a Sludge Bomb or a Spore, but still was always an option to be able to check the Among Us with the Assault Vest Gardevoir as well, and regenerate health back, since I'll be able to trace that ability. So really, it's the combination of the ability and the natural specially defensive bulk that I felt like I needed against the Alolan Raichu was what was driving me to want to bring that here this week. But yeah, obviously it ended up being the MVP of the matchup just because Envy brought both the Regenerator Core and the Alolan Raichu. So yeah, really happy that that ended up being something that I brought.
Holy Viva Las Vegas. I'm inspired by your incredible planning with that Assault Vest Gardevoir. What are your plans for dealing with Cybertron and his Rain team next week?
Oh yeah, so yeah, next week we're playing Cybertron, and Cybertron's an interesting guy. So he's a phenomenal battler, especially in doubles. He's not very experienced with singles right now, but he's still really knowledgeable, which makes him really threatening, right? Because from my perspective, I know that he has all the knowledge in the world about Mons and just doesn't have the instinct about singles. So that means that he could, in theory, make some really good plays that I wouldn't really see coming, because it's really hard to get in the mind of somebody who doesn't have the instinct, because it's the instinct that people like me like to feed off of from the opponent. That's how we're able to predict well in a matchup. That's how I was able to predict Envy pretty well as well, is because I know his instincts just from watching him and watching how he plays over time. Cybertron hasn't played enough singles to really have that instinct, so it's hard to predict him, and that's something that's kind of difficult to prepare for out of him. But in terms of just the team-on-team matchup, his team is very offensive and doesn't have many switch-ins, and that the fact that he doesn't have the switch-ins means that that's something I can try to abuse in my team build, namely through my own speed control. There are ways that I can prepare for the rain and still have the speed advantage. That's something I need to definitely keep in mind. Priority is something that also is really important against a kind of frail offensive team like Cybertron. So those are going to be some of the key concepts that I'll be building around. Not going to spoil any of the specific sets and ideas that I have for this matchup quite yet, but yeah, that's the general idea that I'm going to be trying to build around for the matchup. But yeah, really excited for it. Cybertron is someone I've looked up to in the community for a while, so should be a good one.
Alright, Jolt, so like the good investigative reporter that I am, I've looked at data since 1960, and I have seen that no team that has got 4 wins actually ends up winning a 5th game. It just doesn't happen. Never has happened since 1960. And I want to know what you think the odds are that you will be the last unbeaten team and will make it to 5-0 this week. What do you think?
Well, as far as making it to 5-0 this week, I'll start there. I think there's a good chance. Like I said, Cybertron's is kind of a scary player with a lot of knowledge, but I do think that my team matchup is pretty solid with my variety of ways to command speed in this matchup. So I think my odds of getting to 5-0 they're pretty high. I'm not going to say it's guaranteed by any means, but it's a pretty high chance. Then the next few weeks leading up to that, the next couple weeks beyond that, I like my matchups as well. So I don't know. I think there's a good chance I can stay undefeated a little longer, maybe. And then the only other unbeaten team currently is Chimpact, who has a pretty tough schedule with games coming up against Mono. Monotui especially is probably the toughest matchup he has coming up. Mono is just a fantastic player in the format. Then I think he also has some pretty difficult interdivisional matchups as well against teams in the, I believe, is it the Melee Conference? I think it's the Melee Conference coming up as well. So he has a lot of tough games coming up, potentially a little bit tougher than my upcoming games. So there's a chance that I could outlast him. We'll see. I don't want to be cocky or anything about that. And every single game is important here. I don't want to think past one of my upcoming opponents. So yeah, that's not something I can't really answer, I guess. But I'm hopeful that maybe we can make history and be the first team to go 5-0. But yeah, I guess we'll see.
I just can't help believing that you might break a record that's been held since 1960. It's right around the time when I was recording Love Me Tender and Jailhouse Rock. Oh, Peggy, I remember Peggy. She was a wonderful woman. Anyway, so one night could turn the entire ship around for you. It's now or never, so I better ask this question. What do you fear could blunt your momentum going forward in the next couple weeks?
Ooh. Inadequate prepping is probably the biggest thing that could be a hindrance, I guess, moving forward, because that's always my thing in draft format, right? So as far as many of you already know this, my thing is prep. And if I prep a good team, I'm in a very good position whenever the battle comes around. And, you know, certain weeks, whenever I just don't have the time available to prep to the same extent, then that could come back to hurt me. I'll have to lean more on my battling ability, which is still fine. But obviously, I much prefer to have a properly prepared team. And, you know, with the tournaments coming up, the March Madness tournament coming up, and other obligations, and it's possible that could end up being a hindrance. But, you know, I'm going to still try to give it my all each weekend. We'll see how it goes. But I'd say that the amount of planning usually is going to be what ends up being like the major issue going forward that could throw me off. There's also obviously the opportunity to get outplayed, to get hacks. Those are all factors in Pokemon you have to think about. But as far as what I can control, I think it'll be the planning that I have to make sure I can maintain at the the best possible amount of planning that I can, or the best possible quality of planning that I can do here in the upcoming games. And if I can maintain that, maybe we'll be able to keep the streak going. But, you know, if I don't, then I might be vulnerable. So I guess we'll see. But that's all the time I have for questions
Don't leave
today.
me now, mama.
I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to. But make sure to come on out to the team builder that'll be coming up tomorrow. I would assume it's going to be around noon EST, roughly. And then the battle should be coming up as well on Sunday, as well at around noon EST is what I'll be shooting for. I might coordinate with my opponent, and maybe it'll be a little bit later in the day, but you know, I guess we'll see on that. But thanks for coming out, guys. Thanks for the questions from the reporters today, and I will see you all tomorrow. Peace.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, that's all the time I have for
Don't leave me now, mama.
We're gonna have to do that again. Oh, Jesus.
It's gonna make a great blooper.